Billionaire was about to board when he helped a lost boy, then froze seeing the mother. His ex Welcome to Secrets narrated. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. When the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10 and share what you felt along the way. And if you enjoy emotional stories filled with twists and hidden truths, make sure to follow Secrets Narrated so you don't miss the next one. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy every detail. The pristine marble floors of Denver International Airport gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights as Evan Whitmore adjusted his Italian leather briefcase and checked his Rolex for the third time in 2 minutes. Gate B47, first class to London, departure in 45 minutes. He could still make it. Evan's reflection in the massive terminal windows showed a man who had everything. Perfectly tailored charcoal suit, platinum cufflinks that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and the kind of confidence that only came from building a billion-dollar logistics empire from nothing. At 44, his dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his steel blue eyes held the focused intensity that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in the aviation industry. But tonight, those same eyes carried something else, something he'd been running from for 4 years. Christmas Eve. The airport buzzed with families reuniting, couples embracing, children squealing with excitement about Santa's imminent arrival. Evan moved through the chaos like a ghost, his long strides carrying him past the holiday decorations that seemed to mock his solitude. Get to the gate. Board the plane. Don't think about it. The mantra had worked for 4 years. Every December 24th, he found a reason to be somewhere else. London this time. Far from the memories of Christmas mornings that used to mean something. Far from the ghost of what he'd destroyed. His phone buzzed. Another business call he'd ignore. Nothing mattered except getting on that plane. That's when he heard it. A soft whimpering sound, barely audible over the airport's constant din. Evan's steps slowed despite his urgency. Near the children's play area, a small figure sat hunched on the floor, clutching a red toy car against his chest. The boy looked to be around 3.5 years old, with sandy brown hair that stuck up in impossible directions and tears streaming down his chubby cheeks. He wore a navy blue sweater with a reindeer on the front and tiny jeans that had clearly seen better days. Evan stopped walking entirely. Not your problem. Keep moving. But something about the child's lost expression tugged at a place in his chest he'd thought was permanently closed for business. The boy looked up and their eyes met. Startling blue eyes that seemed eerily familiar. Hey there, buddy. Evan found himself kneeling beside the boy before he'd consciously made the decision to stop. His expensive suit would probably be ruined by the airport floor, but he couldn't bring himself to care. You okay? The boy sniffled and shook his head, holding up the toy car. Mama, he whispered, his voice so small it barely registered. You can't find your mama? Evan's voice gentled in a way that would have shocked his business associates. What's your name? Theo. The boy wiped his nose with the back of his hand, leaving a shiny trail across his sweater. That's a strong name. I'm Evan. He glanced around the immediate area, looking for a frantic parent. Where did you last see your mama, Theo? The boy pointed vaguely toward the food court, his lower lip trembling. She was getting coffee. Then I saw the airplane. He gestured toward the massive windows overlooking the tarmac. And then she was gone. Evan felt his chest tighten. The kid was terrified, and rightfully so. The airport was enormous, crowded, and overwhelming even for adults. Well, let's find her together, okay? Evan held out his hand, surprised by his own words. He should be boarding his flight. He should be running away, just like he always did. Instead, he was holding hands with a lost toddler. They'd barely taken 5 steps when a voice cut through the crowd like a knife through his chest. Theo, Theo! The voice was raw with panic, desperate with the kind of terror that only a mother could feel. Evan knew that voice, had heard it laugh, whisper sweet words in the dark, and speak his name with love, had heard it say goodbye 4 years ago. The woman running toward them was a vision that stopped time itself. Auburn hair flew behind her like a banner, her green eyes wide with fear and relief. She wore a simple cream sweater and dark jeans, her face flushed from running. At 33, Lila Grant was even more beautiful than he remembered, but there was something different about her now. A strength, a confidence that hadn't been there before. Mama! Theo broke free from Evan's hand and ran straight into her arms. Lila dropped to her knees and swept the boy up, holding him so tightly it was as if she was trying to absorb him back into her body. "Oh God, baby, don't ever scare Mama like that again. I thought—" Her voice broke as she pressed kisses into his hair. Then she looked up. Their eyes met across the 3 feet of space that might as well have been an ocean. Lila's face went completely white, her lips parting in shock. Evan. His name fell from her lips like a prayer, a curse, and a question all at once. But it was Theo who broke the spell, pulling back from his mother's embrace to point excitedly at Evan. "Mama, this is my friend. He helped me find you." The boy's words hung in the air between them as Lila studied Evan's face, then looked down at Theo, then back up at Evan. He could see the exact moment the realization hit her, the way her breath caught, the way her arms tightened protectively around the child who had his eyes, his stubborn cowlick, his way of tilting his head when he was thinking, the child who was calling Lila Mama. Evan's world tilted off its axis as one impossible truth crashed into his consciousness like a freight train. How could you have a son who's nearly 4 years old that you never knew existed? What secrets has time been keeping? And what will Evan do when he realizes that the son he just helped find might be his own? The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap. Airport announcements echoed overhead, but the words might as well have been in a foreign language. Evan's mind raced, calculating dates, remembering their last night together, the mathematics of biology clicking into place with brutal clarity. Lila stood slowly, Theo still in her arms, her green eyes never leaving Evan's face. She looked like a cornered animal, protective, wary, ready to bolt. "We need to talk." Evan's voice came out rougher than he intended. "No, we don't." Lila shifted Theo to her hip, the boy's small arms wrapping around her neck. "Come on, baby. We need to catch our flight." She turned to leave, but Evan stepped sideways, not blocking her path exactly, but making it clear he wasn't going anywhere. "Lila, please." The word please felt foreign in his mouth. Evan Whitmore didn't beg. He commanded, negotiated, conquered. But standing there looking at the woman who'd walked away from him and the child who might be his son, he found himself in uncharted territory. "Please what, Evan?" Her voice was steady, controlled, but he could see the tremor in her hands. "Please what? Pretend this is a coincidence? Pretend you care?" Theo lifted his head from his mother's shoulder and looked curiously between the two adults. "Mama, why are you sad?" The innocent question hit both of them like a physical blow. Lila's composure cracked just slightly, and Evan felt something twist in his chest. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. We just need to go." She pressed a kiss to Theo's temple, but her eyes remained locked on Evan's. "Our plane leaves soon. Where are you going?" The question escaped before Evan could stop it. "That's not your business anymore, isn't it?" He gestured toward Theo, whose blue eyes were studying him with unsettling intensity. "When's his birthday, Lila?" She went completely still. "Don't." "When?" "Evan, stop." "August 15th? He was guessing, but the way her face went pale told him he was close. "August 20th. "Stop it." Her voice was barely a whisper. "August 18th. He watched her flinch and knew he'd hit the mark. His legs felt unsteady. 9 months from their last night together. The math was simple, devastating, undeniable. Theo had been watching this exchange like a tennis match, his small head turning back and forth between them. Now he pointed at Evan with one chubby finger. "Are you coming on our airplane?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Evan looked down at the boy, his son, Jesus Christ, his son, and felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Evan started, then stopped. What was he supposed to say? That he'd been running away from Christmas, from memories, from everything that mattered? That he'd been about to board a plane to London because he couldn't stand to be alone with his regrets for another holiday? "We have to go." Lila's voice was firmer now, but Evan could see the exhaustion in her shoulders, the weight she'd been carrying alone. "Where have you been living?" He couldn't stop the questions from coming. 4 years of wondering, of assuming she'd moved on with someone else, of convincing himself he was better off without her. "Seattle. This whole time. Evan, please, just let us go." But he couldn't. Not now. Not when everything he thought he knew about his life had just been turned inside out. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out louder than he intended, and Theo startled in Lila's arms. She immediately began rubbing soothing circles on the boy's back, her maternal instincts kicking in. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. "Why didn't you tell me I had a son?" "Because you didn't want one." The words exploded out of her, raw and painful. Several nearby passengers turned to look, and Lila immediately lowered her voice, but her eyes blazed with old hurt. You made that crystal clear, Evan. Children were complications, remember? Complications you couldn't afford. The words hit him like physical blows because they were true. He had said that. Multiple times. Usually when they'd walk past families in the park, or when Lila would pause to coo at babies in restaurants. He'd been building his empire, focused solely on growth, expansion, success. That was different, he said weakly. Was it? Was it really? Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. You were sleeping with your secretary, Evan. You were working 18-hour days and coming home angry when I asked about your meetings with investors who all seemed to be beautiful women half your age. You think I was going to trap you with a baby you didn't want? Theo was getting restless, squirming in her arms. Mama, I'm tired. I know, baby. Just a few more minutes. She bounced him gently, her voice automatically shifting to that soft, musical tone all mothers seem to possess. Evan watched the interaction with fascination and growing pain. This woman had raised his child alone, had gone through pregnancy alone, labor alone, sleepless nights alone, had celebrated first words, first steps, first everything without him. I would have changed, he said quietly. If I'd known. Would you have? She looked at him with such profound sadness it took his breath away. Or would you have written checks and hired nannies and convinced yourself that was enough? He opened his mouth to protest, then closed it, because the truth was, he didn't know. The man he'd been 4 years ago might have done exactly that. Mama, who is that man? Theo was looking at Evan again with those impossibly familiar eyes. Lila's jaw tightened. He's someone Mama used to know. Is he nice? The simple question from his son's innocent mouth broke something inside Evan's chest. I try to be, he answered directly to Theo, his voice gentle. Theo smiled, a brilliant, gap-toothed grin that was pure sunshine. I like your watch, it's shiny. Despite everything, Evan almost smiled. Thank you. We really need to go. Lila was already backing away, but Evan could see the conflict in her eyes. Part of her, a small part, wanted to stay to hash this out to figure out what the hell they were supposed to do now. What flight are you on? Evan, just tell me what flight. She hesitated, then sighed. Southwest 1847 to Seattle. It boards in 20 minutes. He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. Cancel it. What? Cancel the flight. We need to talk. Really talk. And not here. Not in an airport with a toddler who doesn't understand what's happening. I can't just cancel our flight. We have plans, commitments. I'll get you on another flight. Tomorrow. Next week. Whenever you want. But Lila, he stepped closer, careful not to spook Theo. I just found out I have a son. Don't you think that deserves more than a 5-minute conversation in an airport terminal? She was wavering. He could see it in the way her grip tightened on Theo, in the way she was biting her lower lip. A nervous habit he remembered from their time together. What do you want from us, Evan? The question was so simple, so direct, and yet he didn't have an answer. What did he want? To be a father? To win her back? To make up for 4 years of not knowing his son existed? I want to not be a stranger to my own child. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility and pain. In the distance, a gate agent announced the boarding of Southwest Flight 1847 to Seattle. Lila looked toward the gate, then down at Theo, then back at Evan. The weight of her decision pressed down on all of them as she stood at the crossroads between the life she'd built and the man who'd just walked back into it. The final boarding call for Southwest 1847 to Seattle echoed through the terminal, urgent and unforgiving. Lila closed her eyes, her breath shaky as she held Theo closer to her chest. The boy was getting heavier in her arms, his eyelids drooping with the exhaustion that came with being almost 4 years old and way past his usual bedtime. Mama? Theo's voice was sleepy, confused. Are we going home now? Home. The word hit Evan like a punch to the gut. Home was Seattle. Home was a life he'd never been part of. Home was bedtime stories and scraped knees and birthday parties he'd missed. 3.5 years of home that had happened without him. I don't know, baby, Lila whispered, and Evan could hear the tremor in her voice. Mama's thinking. She looked toward the gate where the last stragglers were showing their boarding passes, then back at Evan. Her green eyes were stormy with conflict, fear, and something else. Something that looked almost like hope. If I stay, she said quietly. If I miss this flight, what then? You disappear again when you get bored? When this novelty wears off and you remember why you didn't want children in the first place? The accusation stung because it was fair. Evan had a track record of walking away when things got complicated. when emotions ran too deep, when the stakes felt too high. But looking at Theo's sleepy face, at those blue eyes that were unmistakably his own, he felt something shift inside his chest, something permanent and unbreakable. "I won't disappear," he said, and meant it more than he'd meant anything in years. "How do I know that?" Because he struggled for the words, for some way to make her understand that he wasn't the same man who had destroyed their relationship 4 years ago. "Because I've been disappearing for 4 years, Lila, running from everything that mattered, and I'm tired of running." Theo lifted his head and looked at Evan with sudden alertness. "Are you sad too?" The innocent question from his son's mouth nearly undid him completely. "Yeah, buddy. I'm a little sad. When I'm sad, Mama sings to me." "Do you want her to sing to you?" Evan's throat tightened. "Maybe later." Lila was studying his face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a complex equation. He could see her weighing risks, calculating possibilities, trying to protect both herself and Theo from potential heartbreak. The gate agent made one final announcement. "Last call for Seattle." "Okay," Lila said suddenly, her voice barely audible over the airport noise. "Okay, I'll stay, but not here, not in public. And if Theo gets scared or uncomfortable, if this becomes too much for him, we leave immediately," Evan finished. "Whatever you need, whatever makes you both comfortable." She nodded, then turned toward the gate agent. "Excuse me, I need to speak with someone about changing my flight." 15 minutes later, they were walking through the airport in surreal silence. Theo had perked up at the adventure of not getting on the airplane, chattering about the moving walkways and pointing at every plane they passed. Evan had arranged for a car, not his usual black sedan with a driver, but a simple rental that wouldn't intimidate a small child. "Where are we going?" Lila asked as they waited by the baggage claim for her single suitcase. "There's a hotel nearby, the Westin. They have a family suite room service, everything we need to—" He paused, realizing how presumptuous he sounded. "I mean, if you're comfortable with that, I can get you your own room, of course. Separate floors if you want." She almost smiled at his awkwardness. "One suite is fine, but I'm keeping the bedroom with Theo." "Of course." The drive to the hotel was filled with Theo's running commentary on everything they passed. "Look, Mama, Christmas lights. That building is really tall. Why is that man wearing a funny hat?" His innocent chatter filled the spaces where adult conversation should have been, providing a buffer against the tension crackling between his parents. Evan found himself stealing glances at Lila in the rearview mirror. She'd changed so much, but in ways that made her more beautiful, not less. There was a confidence about her now, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. Motherhood had shaped her into someone formidable. The Westin was elegant but not ostentatious. Evan had chosen it deliberately to avoid overwhelming them with his wealth. The suite had a living area with a couch and coffee table, a small kitchenette, and a separate bedroom with 2 queen beds. "This is fancy," Theo announced, immediately gravitating toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city lights. "Mama, look how tiny the cars are." Lila set down their suitcase and helped Theo out of his jacket, her movements efficient and practiced. Evan watched the domestic scene with fascination and growing ache. This was what he'd missed. The casual intimacy of family life, the way she anticipated Theo's needs before he voiced them. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" she asked Theo, smoothing his hair. "Can we have room service?" Theo's eyes were wide with the possibility. "Like in the movies? If that's okay with—" Lila glanced at Evan, seeming to remember he was there. "Whatever he wants," Evan said quickly. "Whatever you both want." They ordered simple food, grilled cheese and fries for Theo, salads for the adults. And while they waited, an awkward silence settled over the room. Theo was exploring every corner of the suite, opening drawers and touching everything with the fearless curiosity of a toddler. "He's beautiful," Evan said quietly, watching his son investigate the complimentary chocolates on the pillows. "He's everything to me." Lila's voice was fierce with maternal protection. "Tell me about him." "About everything." Lila curled up in the corner of the couch, tucking her legs under her. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. When did he start walking? What's his favorite food? Is he in preschool? Does he have friends? What makes him laugh?" The questions poured out of him, years of unknown history demanding answers. "He walked at 11 months, she began, her voice softening as she watched Theo. "Early, like he was in a hurry to see the world. His favorite food changes weekly, but right now it's pancakes with way too much syrup. He's in preschool 3 days a week and has a best friend named Maya, who's convinced they're going to get married when they turn 4. Despite everything, Evan found himself smiling. What else? He loves books, especially the ones with dragons. He can count to 20 in English and 10 in Spanish. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, has been working with him. He's obsessed with airplanes, which I guess makes sense now. She gestured vaguely at Evan. He sleeps with a stuffed elephant named Mr. Peanuts and refuses to take baths without at least 6 rubber ducks. Each detail was a gift and a knife, a glimpse into the life he'd missed, the moments he could never get back. "And you?" he asked. "What have you been doing?" "Surviving," she said simply. "Working. Raising him. I'm a graphic designer now. Freelance mostly so I can work around his schedule. We have a small apartment in Capitol Hill. Nothing fancy, but it's ours." "Mama." Theo's voice interrupted whatever Evan had been about to say. The boy had discovered the remote control and somehow turned on the TV to a Christmas movie. "Look, Santa. Come here, baby." Lila patted the couch beside her, and Theo climbed up, snuggling against her side. The three of them sat there in the soft lamplight, watching animated reindeer dance across the screen, and for a moment, it almost felt like a family, almost felt like what they could have been. But Evan knew that underneath the temporary peace there were deeper conversations waiting, harder truths to face, and the biggest question of all, whether forgiveness was possible after 4 years of absence and a lifetime of damage already done. By the time room service arrived, Theo had fallen asleep against Lila's shoulder, his small body warm and trusting in a way that made Evan's chest ache. The Christmas movie played softly in the background, forgotten as both adults watched the rise and fall of the child's breathing. "I should put him to bed," Lila whispered, but she made no move to get up. There was something peaceful about the moment, something neither of them wanted to break. "Does he always fall asleep so easily?" Evan asked quietly. "Only when he feels safe." The words carried weight, an unspoken message about trust and security, and the life they'd built without him. Evan watched as she carefully maneuvered Theo off the couch, supporting his head as she lifted him. It was clearly a practiced movement, something she'd done hundreds of times. The boy stirred slightly but didn't wake as she carried him toward the bedroom. "There are pajamas in the suitcase," she called softly over her shoulder. Evan found himself following, drawn by curiosity and something deeper. He stood in the doorway, watching as Lila efficiently changed Theo into dinosaur print pajamas, the boy remaining mostly asleep through the process. She tucked him under the covers of one of the queen beds, kissed his forehead, and whispered something too low for Evan to hear. "What did you say to him?" Evan asked when she joined him back in the living area. "That he's safe, that I love him, and that I'll be right here when he wakes up." She settled back onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "It's what I say every night." The room service cart sat between them, loaded with food neither of them seemed interested in eating. The weight of everything unsaid filled the space like fog. "Can I ask you something?" Lila's voice was tentative. "What happened to you? I mean, really happened? Because the man I fell in love with he would never have cheated on you?" Evan finished when she couldn't say the words. She nodded, her eyes fixed on her hands. Evan was quiet for a long moment, trying to find words for the slow dissolution that had happened without him even noticing. "I got lost," he said finally. "The business started growing so fast and suddenly everyone wanted something from me. Investors, clients, employees, women who saw the money before they saw me. That's not an excuse." "No, it's not." He looked directly at her. "I started believing I deserved the attention, that I'd earned the right to have everything I wanted when I wanted it. I convinced myself you'd understand, that you'd wait, that what we had was solid enough to survive my mistakes. But it wasn't." "But it wasn't," he agreed. "And by the time I realized what I was losing, you were already gone." Lila reached for her water glass, her movements careful and controlled. "Do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't even the cheating, not really. It was that you stopped seeing me. I'd try to tell you about my day and you'd answer emails. I'd suggest we go somewhere together and you'd schedule it like a business meeting. I became invisible in my own relationship." The words hit him like physical blows because they were true. Every accusation, every hurt. He remembered it all now with painful clarity. "The woman I caught you with," Lila continued. "She wasn't even the first, was she?" Evan's silence was answer enough. "I thought so." She let out a shaky breath. "I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid or needy. But deep down I knew. Why didn't you leave sooner? Because I loved who you used to be, and I kept hoping that man would come back." Her voice broke slightly. "But he didn't, did he? Not until it was too late." They sat in the heavy quiet, the Christmas movie still playing its cheerful soundtrack in stark contrast to the pain filling the room. "What about after?" Evan asked. "After you found out you were pregnant?" Lila's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach as if remembering. "I was terrified. 29 years old, single, pregnant, with no family to help me. My parents died when I was 25. You remember that? No siblings. Just me and this baby I hadn't planned for. You could have called me." And said what? "Hi, Evan, I know you're busy with your empire and your secretary, but surprise. You're going to be a father to the child you never wanted?" She shook her head. "You would have written me a check and hired lawyers to make sure I never bothered you again." He wanted to protest, to say he would have been different, but the truth was she was probably right. The man he'd been then would have seen a baby as a liability, a complication to be managed rather than a miracle to be celebrated. "Tell me about when he was born," Evan said suddenly. Lila's expression softened. "August 18th, 2:47 a.m., 15 hours of labor. He was 8 pounds, 2 ounces, and he had this full head of dark hair that stuck up everywhere." She smiled at the memory. "The first time they put him in my arms, he opened his eyes and looked right at me, like he was trying to figure out if I was going to be good enough to be his mom. Were you? Good enough? I had to be. There was no one else." Her voice was fierce with remembered determination. "I read every parenting book I could find, took him to every doctor's appointment, every milestone checkup. When he got his first fever, I called the pediatrician's office 4 times in one night because I was convinced something terrible was happening." Evan found himself smiling despite the ache in his chest. "What else?" "His first word was airplane. Not mama or dada. Airplane. He was 8 months old and we were at the park near SeaTac. A plane flew overhead, and clear as day he said airplane. I cried for an hour because I thought it was a sign that he missed his father, even though he'd never met you." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Theo's obsession with planes, Evan's aviation empire, genetics expressing themselves in ways neither parent could have anticipated. "What would you have named him if you'd known about my middle name?" Evan asked. "What's your middle name?" "Theodore." Lila went very still. "You're kidding. Theodore James Whitmore. My grandfather's name. I named him Theodore because it means gift of God," she whispered. "I had no idea. So he's Theodore? Despite everything, Lila laughed. A real laugh, not bitter or sarcastic, but genuinely amused. "I guess he is. It was such a small moment, such a tiny connection, but it felt monumental, like the universe had been orchestrating this reunion long before any of them knew it." "Lila," Evan said carefully, "I know I don't have the right to ask this, and I know I can't undo the past 4 years, but I want to be in his life, in whatever way you'll allow." She studied his face for a long time, searching for something. "You'll have to prove it. Not with money or grand gestures, but with consistency, with showing up. Theo's been hurt by people leaving before. Babysitters who didn't work out, my ex-boyfriend who decided he wasn't ready to be a stepfather after 6 months." "You had a boyfriend?" The question came out sharper than he intended, and Lila raised an eyebrow. "I had a life, Evan. I tried to move on. It didn't work out because—" She paused, looking embarrassed. "Because I apparently have terrible judgment when it comes to men. What was wrong with him?" "Nothing was wrong with him. He was kind, patient, good with Theo. But he wasn't—" She stopped herself, but Evan could fill in the blank. "He wasn't you." The admission hung between them, unspoken but understood. Despite everything, the betrayal, the hurt, the years of silence, some part of her had never stopped loving him. And God help him, he'd never stopped loving her either. Evan woke to the sound of small feet padding across hardwood floors, and a whispered conversation he couldn't quite make out. Sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains, and for a moment, he was disoriented, until he remembered where he was, and why. He'd fallen asleep on the couch sometime after midnight, despite Lila's offer to get him his own room. Neither of them had wanted to break the fragile connection they'd rebuilt through hours of careful conversation. "Mama, why is the man still here?" Theo's voice carried from the bedroom, curious but not afraid. "Remember I told you we were going to talk? Well, we're still talking." Lila's voice was soft, patient. "Is he going to have breakfast with us?" Evan held his breath, waiting for her answer. "Would you like that?" "Yes. Can we order room service again? With pancakes?" Evan found himself smiling before he was fully awake. His son wanted to have breakfast with him. Such a simple thing, but it felt like winning the lottery. He heard movement in the bedroom. Then Theo appeared in the doorway, still in his dinosaur pajamas but wide awake, and ready to explore. When he saw Evan on the couch, his face lit up with genuine delight. "You're still here." "I'm still here," Evan confirmed, sitting up and trying to smooth down his wrinkled dress shirt. He probably looked like hell, but Theo didn't seem to care. "Are you hungry? Mama says we can have pancakes." "That sounds perfect." Lila emerged from the bedroom looking effortlessly beautiful in jeans and a soft green sweater that brought out her eyes. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she had the kind of natural glow that didn't need makeup. "Good morning," she said, and there was something different in her voice, less guarded than yesterday. "Good morning. Did you sleep okay?" "Better than I expected." She moved to the kitchenette and started a pot of coffee. Theo's convinced that since it's Christmas morning and there's snow outside, today is going to be magical. Evan looked out the windows and saw that she was right. Soft white flakes were falling steadily, blanketing the city in pristine white. He might be onto something. "Mama, can we build a snowman later?" Theo bounced on his toes with excitement. "We'll see, baby. We need to figure out our plans for the day." Evan felt a stab of panic. Plans. Reality. The fact that this perfect bubble couldn't last forever. "What time is your rescheduled flight?" he asked. "Tomorrow evening." She didn't look at him as she said it. "I figured we needed more than 12 hours to figure things out." Relief flooded through him. A whole day. 24 more hours to prove himself, to show both of them that he'd changed. "Can I take you somewhere today? Both of you?" The invitation came out before he'd fully formed the thought. Lila paused in her coffee making. "Where?" "I don't know. Wherever Theo wants to go." "What do you like to do on Christmas, buddy?" Theo scrunched up his face in concentration. "We usually go to the zoo, but the zoo here might be closed because of Christmas." "What about the aquarium?" Evan suggested. "The downtown aquarium is open on holidays. They have sharks and stingrays and this tunnel you can walk through where fish swim all around you." "Really?" Theo's eyes went wide with wonder. "Really? And after that, maybe we could drive around and look at Christmas lights? I bet this city has some pretty amazing displays. Can we, Mama? Please, please, please." Lila looked between Theo's hopeful face and Evan's careful expression. "I suppose that would be okay, but first breakfast. And you need to get dressed." "I'll order room service," Evan said, reaching for the phone. "Pancakes for the birthday boy." "It's not my birthday." Theo giggled. "That was in August." "Oh, right. Pancakes for the Christmas boy, then." As they waited for breakfast to arrive, Evan found himself on the floor with Theo, playing with the toy cars the boy had brought in his backpack. It was surreal, watching his son create elaborate scenarios involving crashes and rescues complete with sound effects and dramatic commentary. "This one is the daddy car," Theo said, holding up a blue sports car. "And this is the mama car." He showed Evan a red sedan. "And this is the baby car." A tiny yellow taxi completed the family. "What do they do together?" Evan asked, genuinely curious about how his son's mind worked. "They go on adventures, and when the baby car gets scared, the daddy car protects him, and the mama car sings songs to make him feel better." The simple innocence of it broke Evan's heart and filled it at the same time. This was what family was supposed to be. Protection, comfort, presence. "That sounds like a perfect family," Evan said quietly. "Yeah," Theo agreed enthusiastically. Then he looked up at Evan with those serious blue eyes. "Are you somebody's daddy?" The question hung in the air like a live wire. Lila stopped moving in the kitchenette, clearly listening. Evan met his son's gaze steadily. "I think I might be. I'm still figuring it out." "Oh," Theo seemed to consider this. "Being a daddy looks hard?" "Why do you say that?" "Because Maya's daddy is always tired, and sometimes he gets grumpy when Maya asks him to play. But he still loves her a lot." "How do you know he loves her?" "Because he always comes back. Even when he has to go to work or go on trips, he always comes back." The wisdom in his son's simple words hit Evan like a physical blow. Love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments, it was about showing up. Consistently. Reliably. Even when it was hard. "You're very smart," Evan told him. "I know," Theo said matter-of-factly, then went back to his cars. Breakfast arrived in a flurry of covered dishes and impressive presentations. Theo's pancakes came with whipped cream and strawberries arranged in a smiley face, which delighted him so much he insisted on taking a picture with Lila's phone before eating them. "This is the best Christmas ever," he declared through a mouthful of pancakes and syrup. "Even without presents?" Lila asked, cutting up his food into smaller pieces. "We don't need presents. We have pancakes and snow and—" He looked at Evan thoughtfully. And new friends. New friends. Not daddy, not family, but friends. It was a start, more than Evan had any right to hope for. After breakfast, they bundled up for their adventure. Theo was beside himself with excitement as they took the elevator down to the lobby, chattering nonstop about fish and sharks and Christmas lights. The rental car felt different today, less like strangers sharing a ride, and more like something approaching a family outing. Theo was secured in a car seat Evan had somehow procured overnight. Lila didn't ask how, and he kept up a running commentary on everything they passed. Look, Mama, that building has a Christmas tree on top. I see it, baby. And that one has lights shaped like snowflakes. The aquarium was magical through a child's eyes. Theo pressed his face against every glass wall, oohing and eyeing at jellyfish and sea turtles and tropical fish in impossible colors. When they reached the shark tunnel, he grabbed both Evan's and Lila's hands without thinking, creating a chain between them as hammerheads glided overhead. I'm not scared, he announced, though his grip tightened when a particularly large shark swam directly above them. You're very brave, Evan told him, and meant it. Braver than you? Theo challenged. Much braver than me. They spent 3 hours wandering through underwater worlds, and Evan found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. There were no business calls, no meetings, no deadlines. Just the simple pleasure of watching his son discover new things. But it was the quiet moments that affected him most. The way Theo automatically reached for Lila's hand when they crossed busy areas. The way she anticipated his needs before he voiced them. Pulling out snacks when he got cranky and suggesting bathroom breaks before he asked. The way they moved together with the easy choreography of a partnership built over years. He was the outsider here, the newcomer trying to find his place in an already perfect system. But for the first time in his adult life, being an outsider didn't make him want to conquer or possess. It made him want to earn his way in. As they prepared to leave the aquarium, Theo tugged on Evan's coat sleeve. Can I tell you a secret? He whispered. Evan knelt down to the boy's level. Of course. Theo cupped his small hands around Evan's ear. I think my mama likes you. The innocent observation sent warmth spreading through Evan's chest. He glanced over at Lila, who was buying postcards at the gift shop, unaware of her son's matchmaking efforts. What makes you think that? Evan whispered back. She keeps smiling when she looks at you, and she only does that when she's happy, out of the mouths of babes. Evan realized the boy was right. Lila had been smiling more today, her guard dropping incrementally as the hours passed. Can I tell you a secret too? Evan asked. Theo nodded eagerly. I think you and your mama are the best Christmas present I could ever get. The boy's face broke into the kind of pure, joyful grin that could power a small city. Really? Really. But even as he said the words, Evan knew that tomorrow was coming. Tomorrow when Lila would take Theo back to Seattle, back to their real life, and he'd be left to figure out how to be part of a family he'd only just discovered existed. By late afternoon, snow was falling more heavily, transforming Denver into a winter wonderland that made even Evan, who'd traveled the world, stop and stare in wonder. They'd spent the day touring the city's Christmas light displays, driving slowly through neighborhoods where houses competed for the most spectacular decorations. Theo had fallen asleep in his car seat during the last stop, exhausted from excitement and sugar from the hot chocolate they'd shared at a holiday market. Lila sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching the snow collect on the windshield. He had a good day, she said softly, glancing back at their sleeping son. So did I. Evan turned down a side street lined with houses covered in twinkling lights. I can't remember the last time I just enjoyed something without thinking about work or schedules or what came next. You used to be like that, before everything changed. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds being Theo's soft breathing and the gentle swish of windshield wipers. The city looked magical in the snow, like a snow globe someone had shaken and set down to settle. Can I ask you something? Lila's voice was hesitant. What happened to your company? I mean, I know it's successful, but what happened to the man who built it? Evan considered the question as he navigated through the snowy streets. I think I got addicted to the chase, to winning. Every deal had to be bigger, every quarter had to beat the last. Somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started the business in the first place, which was freedom. I wanted to be my own boss, make my own decisions, build something that mattered. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Instead, I became a slave to everything I thought I wanted. Lila was quiet for a long moment. And now Now I'm wondering what the point of all of it was if I have no one to share it with. They pulled into the hotel parking garage as the snow continued to fall. Evan carefully lifted the still sleeping Theo from his car seat, surprised by how natural it felt to hold his son. The boy stirred slightly but remained asleep, his small hand curling around Evan's shirt collar. Back in the suite, Lila efficiently changed Theo into pajamas and tucked him into bed while Evan watched from the doorway. She'd done this routine thousands of times, but tonight felt different. Tonight, there was someone there to witness the quiet devotion of her love. "Sweet dreams, my brave boy," she whispered, kissing Theo's forehead. "Tomorrow we go home, but tonight we're safe and warm and together." The word home hit Evan like a cold splash of reality. Tomorrow. Their flight was at 7 p.m. In less than 24 hours they'd be gone, and this magical interlude would be over. When Lila joined him in the living room, she looked as deflated as he felt. "What happens now?" she asked, settling onto the couch with her legs curled under her. "I don't know, I've been trying not to think about it." "Well, we have to think about it. We have to figure out logistics, schedules, how this is going to work with Theo." Evan sat down beside her, close enough to catch the faint scent of her perfume, something light and floral that he remembered from before. "What do you want, ideally?" Lila was quiet for so long, he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I want him to have a father who shows up, not just with money or presents, but really shows up. For school plays and scraped knees and bedtime stories and ordinary Tuesday afternoons when nothing special is happening." "And what about you?" His voice was equally quiet. "What do you want for you?" She met his eyes and he saw something vulnerable there, something she'd been guarding carefully. "I want to stop being afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of trusting you again. Of letting him love you and then watching you disappear when things get difficult." Her voice broke slightly. "Of admitting that I never stopped missing you, even after everything you put me through." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Evan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I have to earn your trust and his love. But Lila," he squeezed her fingers gently, "I'm not the same man who hurt you. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I'll never stop trying to be worthy of you both." "How do I know that? How do I know this isn't just guilt or some midlife crisis?" Evan was quiet, thinking about her question. "Because yesterday morning I was getting on a plane to run away from everything that reminded me of you. And today the thought of you taking him back to Seattle and me going back to my empty life feels like dying." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them. I've never meant anything more in my life." They sat there holding hands in the soft lamplight, the Christmas tree in the corner casting colorful shadows on the walls. Outside snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white. "If we try this," Lila said finally, "if we really try to make this work, it has to be different this time. I won't be invisible again, Evan. I won't be something you fit in between meetings. You'll never be invisible to me again, I promise." She studied his face for a long moment, searching for sincerity, for some sign that this time would be different. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "Okay, we can try, but slowly, carefully. And if you hurt him, if you hurt either of us, I won't. You don't know that. You can't know that. You're right. I can't know it, but I can choose it. Every day, every moment. I can choose to be the man you both deserve." As if summoned by their conversation, a small voice called from the bedroom. "Mama? I'm here, baby," Lila called back, but Theo appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "I had a dream about sharks," he said sleepily, "but they were nice sharks who wanted to be friends." Lila smiled, opening her arms. "Come here, dreamer." But instead of going straight to his mother, Theo looked at Evan. "Will you still be here in the morning?" The question was so simple, so trusting, that it nearly broke Evan's heart. "If you want me to be." "I do," Theo said matter-of-factly, then climbed onto the couch between them. And there they sat, three people who were still figuring out how to be a family but who were finally brave enough to try. Evan woke to the sound of his phone buzzing insistently on the coffee table. For a moment he was disoriented. Sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, a small warm body pressed against his side, the scent of coffee brewing somewhere nearby. Theo had apparently migrated from his bed to the couch sometime during the night, and was now sprawled across Evan's chest, one small hand fisted in his shirt. The sight of his sleeping son filled Evan with such overwhelming tenderness that he almost ignored the phone. Almost. But years of being on call for his business had trained him to respond to that particular ringtone, his assistant's emergency line. He carefully extracted himself from under Theo and answered quietly, "This better be life or death, Miranda." "Sir, I'm so sorry to bother you on Christmas, but we have a situation. The Singapore deal. Something's gone wrong. The investors are threatening to pull out and they're demanding a face-to-face meeting. Today." Evan closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settling back onto his shoulders. "Today is Christmas." "I know, sir. I tried to explain that, but they're saying if you're not on a plane to Singapore within 12 hours, they're walking. This is the Morrison account. It's worth $300 million. $300 million. Enough to fund his company's expansion for the next 5 years. Enough to secure the jobs of his 800 employees. The old Evan would have been packed and headed to the airport within the hour. "Sir, are you there?" "I'm here." He glanced toward the bedroom where Lila was emerging, her hair tousled from sleep, wearing an oversized t-shirt that somehow made her look even more beautiful. "Should I have the jet prepared?" Miranda pressed. Lila's eyes found his, and he saw understanding dawn on her face. She'd heard enough to know what this call meant. Her expression didn't change, but something shuddered behind her eyes. "Give me 2 hours," he said finally. "I'll call you back." He hung up and found Lila staring at him with the careful blankness she'd perfected during their relationship, the look that meant she was protecting herself from disappointment. "You have to go," she said simply. "I don't know. Maybe. It's complicated. It always is." She moved to the kitchenette, her movements sharp and efficient. "Coffee?" "Lila, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. You have a business to run. Important deals. I understand." But her tone suggested she understood all too well, understood that despite everything they'd talked about last night, nothing had really changed. "Mama?" Theo sat up on the couch, his hair sticking up in impossible directions. "Why do you sound sad?" "I'm not sad, baby. Just tired." She poured coffee into a mug with hands that weren't quite steady. "How did you sleep?" "Good. I dreamed about flying in airplanes with the sharks from yesterday." He looked around the room, his gaze settling on Evan. "Oh, you're still here." "I'm still here," Evan confirmed, though the words felt hollow now. "Are we going to have more pancakes?" The innocent question hung in the air as Evan felt the weight of the decision crushing down on him. $300 million, 800 jobs, the biggest deal his company had ever negotiated. Or Christmas morning with the son he'd just discovered and the woman he'd never stopped loving. "Actually, sweetie," Lila said carefully, "we need to talk about today. We need to pack our things and get ready to go home." "But I don't want to go home yet." Theo's face crumpled with confusion. "I want to stay and play with Evan." "I know. But sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do." Evan felt something sharp and painful twist in his chest. "What if we didn't have to?" Both Lila and Theo looked at him. "What if you both came with me?" "To Singapore?" Lila's coffee mug hit the counter harder than necessary. "Are you serious?" "Why not? Theo's never been on a plane, have you, buddy? We could make it an adventure." "Really?" Theo bounced on the couch. "We could fly in an airplane? A real one?" But Lila was shaking her head. "Absolutely not." "Why not?" "Because I'm not going to drag my son halfway around the world for a business meeting. Because I have responsibilities in Seattle. Work, his preschool, our life. Because this is exactly what I was afraid of." "What do you mean?" "You're doing it again, Evan. Making decisions about our lives without consulting us. Assuming we'll just rearrange everything to fit your schedule. That's not what I'm doing, isn't it?" Her voice was rising, and Theo was watching them with wide, worried eyes. "Not 12 hours ago. You promised me I'd never be invisible again. And now you're expecting me to drop everything and follow you across the globe because it's convenient for you. It's not about convenience. It's about not wanting to leave you. Then don't leave." The simple words hit him like a slap. "Don't leave. Choose us. Choose this. It's $300 million, Lila. I can't just—" And there it is. Her voice went quiet, deadly calm. "When it comes down to it, the money wins. It always wins with you. That's not fair. This isn't just about money. It's about 800 people who depend on me for their jobs. And what about the one little person who's depending on you to be his father?" They stared at each other across the suite, years of old hurts and new hopes colliding in the space between them. Theo had gone very quiet on the couch, his toy car clutched tight in his small fists. "I have an idea," Evan said finally. "What if I send my CFO instead? Marcus has been with me for 10 years. He knows this deal inside and out. Can you do that? I don't know. Maybe. I'd be taking a huge risk. And if the deal falls through? Evan looked at his son, who was watching him with those serious blue eyes that were so much like his own. Then it falls through. $300 million, Evan. You'd really risk that? He moved to the couch and sat down beside Theo, who immediately climbed into his lap. You want to know what I've learned in the past 2 days? Money can't buy Christmas morning pancakes with your son. It can't buy the look on your face when you're proud of me. It can't buy back 4 years of bedtime stories I missed. Lila's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You don't know that this will work. We don't know if we can make this work. No, we don't. But I know that if I get on that plane today, we'll never find out. He looked down at Theo, who was playing with his watch. And I'm tired of running away from the only things that actually matter. The phone rang again. Miranda, no doubt wondering what was taking so long. Evan looked at it, then at Lila, then at his son, and for the first time in his adult life, he let it go to voicemail. Mama, Theo said quietly, are you and Evan going to keep fighting? Lila's face crumpled. No, baby, we're not fighting. We're just trying to figure some things out. Grown-ups are weird, Theo observed matter-of-factly. Despite everything, both Evan and Lila laughed. Yes, Lila said, wiping her eyes. We really are. Evan's phone buzzed with a text. Then another. He could feel the weight of his business empire pulling at him, demanding his attention, his presence, his life. But for once something else was pulling harder. Evan's phone had been buzzing non-stop for 20 minutes. Texts from Miranda, calls from board members, emails marked urgent flooding his inbox. The Singapore investors were getting impatient, and his entire company was in crisis mode. But he was sitting on the hotel room floor, building a tower out of coffee stirrers with his son, and he'd never felt more at peace. Higher, Theo demanded, carefully placing another stirrer on top of their precarious construction. Make it touch the ceiling. I don't think we have enough stirrers for that, buddy. Then we need to call room service and ask for more. Lila was curled up in the armchair, watching them with an unreadable expression. She'd been quiet since their argument earlier, processing everything that had happened. Evan's phone rang again. This time it was Marcus, his CFO. I should take this, he said apologetically, stepping away from the tower. Evan, what the hell is going on? Miranda says you've gone radio silent on the biggest deal in company history. Marcus, I need you to go to Singapore. What? Now? Today? Right now. I'm sending the company jet. You know this deal better than anyone except me. You can handle it. Evan, are you insane? These investors specifically requested you. They won't accept a substitute, especially not last minute. Evan watched Theo carefully add another stirrer to their tower, his tongue poking out in concentration. Then we'll lose the deal. The silence on the other end was deafening. Did you just say we'll lose $300 million? That's what I said. Have you lost your mind? What could possibly be more important than... I found him, Marcus. Found who? My son. I have a son. Another long silence. Marcus had been with the company since the beginning. He'd watched Evan's relationship with Lila fall apart, had seen him become increasingly isolated and work-obsessed. Jesus, Evan, are you sure? I'm sure. Evan glanced at Lila, who was pretending not to listen. And I'm not losing him again. Okay, I'm on my way to Singapore. But Evan, if this deal falls through, the board is going to have questions. Let them ask. After he hung up, the room felt unnaturally quiet. Even Theo seemed to sense the gravity of what had just happened. Did you just risk your entire company for us? Lila's voice was barely above a whisper. I risked a deal. The company will survive. A $300 million deal, Evan. That's not just money, that's people's livelihoods. Marcus will pull it off. He's brilliant. But Lila was shaking her head. What if he doesn't? What if this destroys everything you've built? Then I'll build something else. He sat back down beside Theo, who immediately handed him another stirrer. Something that doesn't require me to choose between success and the people I love. You don't love us, Lila said quietly. You can't. You've known him for 2 days. The words hit him like a physical blow. Don't tell me what I feel. I'm trying to protect him, Evan. And myself. This is all happening so fast. And when things don't work out, why are you so sure they won't work out? Because. The word exploded out of her, startling Theo. She immediately lowered her voice, but her eyes were blazing. Because I've been here before. I've watched you choose everything else over me. I've seen you promise to change and then fall right back into the same patterns. This is different. Is it? Or are you just feeling guilty about missing 4 years? Evan felt his temper flare. You think I'm here out of guilt? I don't know why you're here. I'm here because the moment I saw him, everything else stopped mattering. Their raised voices had upset Theo, who was looking between them with worried eyes. Don't fight, he said in a small voice. Please don't fight. Both adults immediately deflated, the fight going out of them at their son's distress. Come here, baby, Lila said, opening her arms. Theo climbed into her lap and she held him close. I'm sorry. Mama didn't mean to get loud. Are you still friends? Theo asked, looking at Evan. We're still friends, Evan assured him. Sometimes friends disagree, but that doesn't mean they stop caring about each other. Oh, Theo seemed to consider this. Like when me and Maya fight about who gets to be the princess. Exactly like that. Lila was quiet for a long moment, holding Theo and staring out the window at the snowy city. There's something I need to tell you, she said finally. Something I should have told you yesterday. Evan felt his stomach drop. What? When I was pregnant? When I decided not to tell you? It wasn't just because I thought you didn't want children. Then why? She took a shaky breath. Because I overheard you on the phone with your lawyer. About a prenup. Evan frowned. What prenup? You were asking him about protecting your assets if we got married. About making sure no one could come after your money if things didn't work out. Her voice was barely audible. You were planning to propose, but you were also planning to protect yourself from me. The memory hit him like a freight train. He had been thinking about proposing, had even bought a ring. But his lawyer had insisted on discussing asset protection, had filled his head with stories about wealthy men who'd lost everything in divorces. Lila, I wasn't trying to protect myself from you, I was just being practical. I know, but it told me everything I needed to know about what kind of marriage we'd have. One where you'd always be looking for the exit, always protecting yourself from the risk of really trusting me. So when you found out you were pregnant, I knew that if I told you, you'd marry me out of obligation, and you'd resent both of us for trapping you. Tears were streaming down her face now. I couldn't live with that. I couldn't raise a child in a marriage where I was seen as a liability. Evan felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. All these years he'd thought she'd left because she couldn't handle his success, but she'd left because she thought he saw her as a threat to it. I never got to explain, he said quietly, about the prenup conversation. What was there to explain? That I told him no, that I fired him the next day and found a new lawyer. He met her eyes. That I threw the prenup papers in the trash because the idea of not trusting you completely felt like the worst kind of betrayal. Lila went very still. You, what? I never wanted a prenup, Lila. That was my father's voice in my head. My lawyer's paranoia. The moment I really thought about it, about what it would mean to start our marriage from a place of distrust, he shook his head. I couldn't do it. But I heard you. You heard me asking questions. You didn't hear me rejecting every answer he gave me. The color drained from her face as the implications hit her. Oh God, Evan, I'm so sorry. You thought I was already planning our divorce before I'd even proposed. She nodded, unable to speak. I was going to propose on your birthday, he said softly. I had it all planned. Dinner at that little Italian place you loved, then a walk through the park where we had our first date. I was going to tell you that you were the only sure thing in my uncertain world. I ruined everything, she whispered. We both did. We stopped talking to each other and started making assumptions instead. Theo had been listening to this exchange with the intense focus children brought to adult conversations they didn't quite understand. Does this mean you're not friends anymore? He asked worriedly. Lila and Evan looked at each other across 4 years of misunderstanding and hurt. I think, Evan said carefully, it means we're figuring out how to be friends again. 2 hours later, Evan's phone rang with news that would have destroyed the old version of himself. The Singapore deal is dead, Marcus said without preamble. They walked. Said if you couldn't be bothered to show up personally, they'd find someone who valued their business. Evan was quiet for a moment, processing the loss of the biggest contract in his company's history. Theo was napping on the couch beside him, and Lila was in the shower giving them both space after the emotional revelations of the morning. How bad? He asked finally. Bad. The board is calling an emergency meeting. Stock will probably take a hit when this goes public. And Evan, Marcus paused. There are already rumors that you've lost focus. Some of the major investors are getting nervous. Let them be nervous. This could cost you control of your own company. Evan looked down at his sleeping son, at the way Theo's hand was curled around his finger even in sleep. Then maybe it's time for a change. Jesus, you really have lost your mind. Maybe, or maybe I've finally found it. After he hung up, Evan sat in the quiet hotel room watching snow fall outside the windows. Everything he'd built over the past decade was potentially crumbling, and he felt peaceful. For the first time in years, he felt like himself again. Lila emerged from the bathroom, her hair damp and her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She looked younger somehow, more like the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "Bad news?" she asked, noting his expression. "The worst. The deal fell through. The board is in revolt. I might lose my company." She sat down across from him, her eyes searching his face. "And how do you feel about that?" "Relieved," he said, surprising himself with the honesty. "Terrified, but relieved." "Why relieved?" "Because for 4 years I've been carrying this weight, this constant pressure to be bigger, better, more successful. And I'm tired, Lila. I'm so tired of being that man." "What would you do if you lost the company?" Evan considered the question seriously. "Start over. Build something smaller, something that matters. Maybe focus on sustainable aviation or pilot training programs for underprivileged kids." He smiled at the thought. Something Theo could be proud of when he's old enough to understand. "You'd really do that? Give up everything you've built?" "I'd give up everything I've built for a chance to build something better." Theo stirred on the couch, blinking sleepily. "Are we still at the hotel?" "We're still here, buddy," Evan said gently. "Good. I like it here." Theo sat up, his hair sticking up in impossible directions. "Can we stay forever?" Lila and Evan exchanged glances. The question of what happened next had been hovering over them all day. "Theo, we need to talk about that," Lila said carefully. "About what happens when we go home to Seattle." "I don't want to go home without Evan," Theo said matter-of-factly. "He's my friend." "I know, sweetie, but Evan has his own home, his own life." "Actually," Evan interrupted, "I've been thinking about that." Lila raised an eyebrow. "Thinking about what?" "Seattle's a beautiful city. Good business opportunities. Amazing coffee." He paused, his heart racing. "I could relocate." "Evan, I'm serious. I could move my headquarters there, or start something new. Be close to Theo." "Close to?" He looked directly at her. "Close to both of you. You can't just uproot your entire life." "Why not? You did it. You built a whole new life in Seattle, raised an amazing kid, started a career. If you can do it, so can I." Theo was bouncing with excitement. "Would you live near us? Could I see you every day?" "If your mama says it's okay." All eyes turned to Lila, who looked overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were discussing. "This is crazy," she said. "You're talking about moving across the country for people you've known for 3 days. I'm talking about moving across the country for my family." The word hung in the air between them. Family. Not just his son, but all of them together. "We're not a family, Evan. We're figuring out what we are. Then let's figure it out together. In the same city. In the same time zone." He leaned forward, his voice gentle but determined. "I spent 4 years running away from you, from us, from everything that mattered. I don't want to spend another day doing that. What if it doesn't work out? What if we try this and we're just too damaged, too different now? Then at least we'll know we tried. And Theo will have his father in his life, which is what matters most." Theo had been following this conversation with intense concentration. Now he climbed off the couch and stood between his parents, looking from one to the other. "I have an idea," he announced solemnly. "What's that, buddy?" Evan asked. "We could have a trial run." Both adults stared at him in amazement. "Where did you learn about trial runs?" Lila asked. "Miss Rodriguez at school. She said when things are hard, you try them for a little bit first to see if they work." Evan found himself grinning. "That's brilliant. What kind of trial run were you thinking?" Theo screwed up his face in concentration. Maybe Evan could come visit us in Seattle for a week, and if he likes it and we like it, then he could stay longer." "Out of the mouths of babes," Lila murmured. "What do you think, Mama?" Theo looked at her hopefully. "Could Evan come visit us?" Lila was quiet for a long moment, and Evan could practically see the war being fought behind her eyes. Fear versus hope. Past pain versus future possibility. "A trial run," she said finally. 1 week. You'd stay in a hotel?" "Of course. And we'd take things slowly. No pressure, no expectations. Whatever you're comfortable with. And if it doesn't work out, if this is just holiday magic that doesn't survive real life, then we figure out how to co-parent from a distance without making it weird. Deal." She looked at Theo, who was practically vibrating with excitement, then back at Evan. 1 week. Starting after New Year's. When things go back to normal. "I can't wait," Evan said, and meant it more than he'd ever meant anything. Yay! Theo threw himself at both of them, wrapping his small arms around their necks and pulling them into an impromptu family hug. And for the first time since that terrible day 4 years ago when everything had fallen apart, Lila allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, some things could be put back together. 6 months later, Evan stood in the kitchen of a modest townhouse in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, making pancakes while 4-year-old Theo sat at the breakfast bar, chattering about starting kindergarten in the fall. And Maya's going to be in my class, and Tommy too. And Miss Rodriguez said kindergarten is where big kids learn to read chapter books. Theo listed excitedly, counting on his syrup-sticky fingers. That sounds exciting, Evan said, flipping a pancake with perhaps more flair than necessary, earning an impressed whoa from his son. The trial week had turned into a month, then 3 months, and finally Evan had sold his Denver penthouse and made the move official. He'd stepped down as CEO of his company, keeping a minority stake but turning day-to-day operations over to Marcus, and started a smaller aviation consulting firm focused on sustainable technology. It wasn't the empire he'd built before, but it was something he could be proud of. Something that didn't require 18-hour days or constant travel. Something that left room for school pickup and bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes. Is Mama coming down for breakfast? Evan asked, though he already knew the answer. Lila had been working late on a big project for a nonprofit organization. Her freelance business had grown into something much larger than either of them had expected. She's in the shower. She said to tell you she'll be down in 5 minutes and that you better not eat all the pancakes before she gets here. Evan grinned. Some things never changed. Lila's sweet tooth, her inability to function before her first cup of coffee, the way she hummed old songs when she thought no one was listening. Other things had changed dramatically, like the fact that she was living in his townhouse now, not just visiting. Like the way she'd fallen asleep in his arms last night after they'd stayed up talking about Theo's school, their work, their carefully rebuilt relationship, like the small velvet box currently hidden in his sock drawer upstairs. Morning, boys. Lila appeared in the doorway, her damp hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing one of Evan's old Stanford t-shirts that hit her mid-thigh. She looked rumpled and beautiful and absolutely perfect. Morning, beautiful, Evan said, leaning over to kiss her cheek as she passed. Pancakes, she said, stealing a piece from Theo's plate. My favorite. Hey, those are mine, Theo protested, but he was giggling. I'll make more, Evan assured them both. We have all morning. It was true. Saturday mornings had become sacred in their house. No work calls, no urgent emails, just the 3 of them being a family. Lila poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter, watching Evan cook with a soft smile. What time do we need to leave for the school visit? Not until noon. The kindergarten orientation is pretty informal. Evan glanced at her. Are you nervous about him starting big school? A little. It feels like such a big step. He's growing up so fast. She moved to the kitchenette and started a pot of coffee. Sometimes I can't believe my baby is starting real school. He's going to do great. He's smart, confident, and he's got the best mom in the world. What if he's not ready? What if he misses us too much? Evan set down his spatula and moved to stand in front of her. Then we'll be right there to pick him up. But Lila, look at him. He gestured toward Theo, who was building a tower with his pancake pieces. He's ready for this adventure. Evan, her voice was soft, touched. I have something for you, he said suddenly. For both of you, actually. It's not my birthday, Lila said, confused. And it's not Christmas, Theo added helpfully. No, but it's special anyway. Evan took a deep breath, his heart pounding. Stay right here. Don't move. He disappeared upstairs, leaving Lila and Theo looking at each other in bewilderment. What do you think he's getting? Theo whispered. I have no idea, baby. When Evan returned, he was carrying a manila folder and the small velvet box, though he kept the box hidden behind his back. Okay, he said, his voice slightly shaky with nerves. Theo, this is for you first. He handed the folder to his son, who opened it with intense concentration, his face scrunching up as he tried to read the official-looking documents inside. I can't read all these big words, Theo said. They're adoption papers, Evan said quietly. If you want, if your mama says it's okay, I'd like to adopt you, officially, legally, so that you're not just my son in my heart, but on paper too. Theo's eyes went wide. Does that mean you'd be my real daddy? I'm already your real daddy, buddy. This just makes it official. Yes, Theo launched himself at Evan, wrapping his arms around his neck. Yes, yes, yes. I want that. Lila was crying, her hand pressed to her mouth. Evan, are you sure? The legal process, the paperwork. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He turned to her, still holding Theo. Which brings me to what I wanted to give you. He set Theo down and pulled out the velvet box, dropping to one knee right there in their kitchen with pancakes burning on the stove and morning sunlight streaming through the windows. Lila Grant. 4 years ago, I was an idiot who almost lost the most precious thing in his life. You gave me a second chance I didn't deserve, and you've made me a better man than I ever thought I could be. His voice was thick with emotion. I love you. I love our son. I love the life we've built together, and I want to keep building it for the next 50 years. He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant solitaire. Nothing flashy or ostentatious, just perfect. Will you marry me? Lila was sobbing now, happy tears streaming down her face. You're really doing this? Proposing to me in our kitchen in your old t-shirt while our son eats pancakes? Is there anywhere else you'd rather be? She looked around their kitchen, at Theo bouncing excitedly on his stool, at the half-eaten pancakes and scattered newspapers, at the coffee maker they'd fought over counter space for, and the pictures on the refrigerator documenting their new life together. No, she said, laughing through her tears. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Evan slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and kissed her while Theo cheered, and the smoke detector started beeping, because the pancakes had indeed burned. I love you, Evan whispered against her lips. I love you too, she whispered back. All of you. This whole beautiful, messy, perfect life. Are we going to be a real family now? Theo asked, tugging on both their hands. We've always been a real family, Lila said, pulling him into their embrace. Now we're just making it official. Like the adoption papers? Exactly like the adoption papers. They stood there in their kitchen, holding each other while the smoke alarm blared and the winter sun painted everything gold, and Evan knew with absolute certainty that this was what happiness looked like. Not a boardroom victory or $1 million deal, but pancakes and proposals and the promise of forever with the people who mattered most. Some love stories begin with grand gestures and fairy tale moments, but the best ones, the ones that last, begin with the simple decision to choose each other every day in all the ordinary moments that make up a life. And as Theo helped them clean up the burned pancakes while planning their joint birthday engagement adoption celebration, Evan realized that sometimes the best things in life really do come to those who stop running long enough to let love catch up. 5 years later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the Whitmore family's kitchen as Lila adjusted 8-year-old Theo's tie for the 3rd time. He was squirming with barely contained excitement, his dark hair finally tamed into something resembling respectability. Mom, it's fine, he protested, though his grin was infectious. I look good enough. You look perfect, she said, stepping back to admire her son, their son, in his miniature black suit. Your baby sister is going to be so proud to have you as her big brother today. Through the kitchen window, Lila could see Evan in the backyard, setting up chairs for the intimate christening ceremony they'd planned. At 49, he was even more handsome than the day she'd fallen in love with him, his temples now fully silver, his face lined with the kind of wrinkles that came from years of genuine laughter. Is Dad nervous? Theo asked, following her gaze. Probably. You know how he gets when everything has to be perfect for you kids. He wasn't nervous when Emma was born. Lila smiled, remembering. Yes, he was. He just hid it better. 2-year-old Emma Rose Whitmore was currently napping upstairs, blissfully unaware that today was her official welcome into the world. She had Evan's blue eyes and Lila's stubborn streak, and she'd had her father wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she'd arrived. The kitchen door opened, and Evan stepped inside, his sleeves rolled up, a satisfied expression on his face. Everything's ready outside. The photographer should be here any minute, and your mother just pulled up. Grandma's here. Theo shot toward the front door like a rocket. Evan moved to stand behind Lila, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. How are you feeling, Mrs. Whitmore? Happy, she said simply, leaning back against his chest. Grateful. Sometimes I still can't believe this is our life. Believe it. He pressed a kiss to her temple. We've earned every moment of it. The past 5 years had been everything Lila had hoped for and more. Evan had built his new company into a moderate success. Not the empire his old firm had been, but something sustainable, ethical, and personally fulfilling. They'd bought this house together, gotten married in a small ceremony in their backyard, and welcomed Emma after 2 years of trying. But more than the milestones, it was the everyday moments that proved they'd gotten it right this time. Evan coaching Theo's Little League team. Family dinners without phone interruptions. Saturday morning pancakes that had become a sacred tradition. The way Evan still brought her coffee in bed every morning. The way he'd learned to braid Emma's hair. The way he never missed a single important moment in their children's lives. Do you ever miss it? Lila asked quietly. The corporate world? The deals? The power? Never. His answer was immediate and certain. That man I used to be. He was successful, but he was miserable. He had everything except what mattered most. What matters most? This. You. Them. Coming home to people who love me not because of what I can provide, but because of who I am when I'm with them. Emma's cry came through the baby monitor, signaling the end of her nap. Evan automatically moved toward the stairs, but Lila caught his hand. I'll get her. You should finish getting ready. Are you sure? I don't mind. I know you don't. She stood on her tiptoes to kiss him softly. That's why you're such a good father. Upstairs, Emma was standing in her crib, her dark curls wild with sleep, her arms reaching immediately for her mother. Mama! Hello, my beautiful girl, Lila cooed, lifting her daughter into her arms. Are you ready for your big day? As she changed Emma into the christening gown that had been Lila's grandmother's, she couldn't help but think about that Christmas Eve 5 years ago when everything had changed. If someone had told her then that she'd end up here, married to Evan with 2 children and a life full of love and laughter, she never would have believed it. But fairy tales, she'd learned, didn't always start with once upon a time. Sometimes they started with heartbreak and second chances and the courage to trust again. Mrs. Whitmore? Evan's voice came from downstairs. Our guests are arriving. Coming, she called back, settling Emma on her hip. The ceremony was perfect in its simplicity. Close friends and family gathered in their backyard, sharing stories and promises about the beautiful little girl who would grow up surrounded by love. Theo held Emma during the blessing, his protective big brother instincts already strong, and Lila felt her heart nearly burst with pride and joy. As the afternoon sun began to set and their guests mingled over champagne and cake, Evan found Lila sitting on their back porch watching Emma toddle around the yard while Theo chased bubbles. Penny for your thoughts, he said, settling beside her. Just thinking about time, how fast it goes, how much can change. She looked at him, this man who'd traveled halfway across the country to build a new life with her. Do you remember what you said that first morning in the hotel, about not wanting to be a stranger to your own child? I remember. Look at you now. She gestured toward the yard where Emma had discovered a flower and was trying to show it to everyone within reach. She adores you. Theo thinks you hung the moon. You're not just their father. You're their hero. Evan was quiet for a moment, watching his children with wonder that hadn't dimmed even after all these years. They saved me, you know. Both of you did. I was so lost before I found you again. We saved each other. As the evening wound down and they tucked their children into bed, Lila reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It hadn't been easy. Rebuilding trust never was. There had been arguments and misunderstandings, moments when old fears crept in and threatened to derail everything they were building. But they'd learned to talk through the hard things, to choose each other even when it was difficult, to remember that love wasn't just a feeling but a daily decision. Now as she stood in the doorway watching Evan read bedtime stories to both children, Emma curled on his lap, Theo snuggled beside him. She knew with absolute certainty that every struggle had been worth it. Some love stories end with the wedding. The best ones, the ones that matter, begin there. Because real love isn't about the grand gesture or the perfect moment. It's about showing up day after day, year after year, for all the ordinary magic that makes up a life shared. And as Evan looked up and caught her watching them, his face breaking into that smile that still made her heart skip after all these years, Lila knew that their story was far from over. It was just beginning. Would you have made the same choice Evan did, giving up everything for love? Sometimes the greatest success isn't measured in dollars or deals, but in the laughter of children and the trust of the person who chooses to build a life with you. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.